Commemorations have been held across the UK and Europe with a 2-minute silence to mark Armistice Day.
Breaking. At exactly 10:45 a.m. During the National Remembrance Day ceremony, broadcast live to 54 countries, the United Kingdom froze. 2,136 veterans, 40 ambassadors and 12 cabinet ministers stood in silence as an urgent message flashed across ITV and Sky News feeds. The Prince of Wales will not be attending. No illness, no excuse, just defiance. At the most sacred day of the British calendar, within 15 minutes, the pound fell 1.4%. Social media exploded with hashtag Royal Rebellion and a constitutional storm began. If you think this Remembrance Day, the only day that was supposed to unite the kingdom, Britain was divided again. At exactly 10:45 a.m, as 2,000 veterans stood in silence at Windsor Castle, cameras from 42 television channels were broadcasting live. A message from Buckingham Palace interrupted the entire event. The Prince of Wales will not be attending. No scheduling conflict, no explanation, no apology, just an absence. Deliberate and defiant. Inside Downing Street, panic spread like wildfire. Aides scrambled to draft statements while ministers whispered the same question: why now and why him? In 70 years, the monarchy had never boycotted a Prime Minister's state ceremony. Never. This was not a missed ceremony, but a public rift between two pillars of Britain, the royal family and the government. In a country where time is traditionally measured, 15 minutes of silence became a symbol of something broken. If unity can collapse on a day of remembrance of sacrifice, what happens next? What followed wasn't chaos, it was confrontation. Royal sources later confirmed what many in Westminster feared. Prince William's absence was no accident. It was a protest. Behind closed doors, a document titled Secret Cabinet 4B Reform Package was circulated through Whitehall. The plan proposed cutting £150 million a year from the sovereign grant, redirecting the money into community modernisation programmes controlled by party-appointed committees. Another clause gave Parliament the power to veto royal appointments, even those within the palace. And most alarmingly, every speech, statement or overseas trip by any working royal would need to be approved by the government 48 hours in advance. Downing Street called it modernisation. For decades, Britain's unwritten constitution relied on mutual trust. Now that trust is crumbling beneath spreadsheets and signatures. The Treasury memo described inefficiencies in symbolic functions, a chilling phrase referring to the monarchy itself. A later line leaked to the Times that read, "Public sentiment for legacy institutions remains high but weakens under financial scrutiny." Meaning, dismantling the crown while pretending to save money. Within 24 hours, the palace had cross-examined every clause, every footnote. What they discovered stunned them. The proposed reforms would give the government direct oversight of all royal correspondence and international activities, a power not exercised since 1649, the year England executed its king. At 8 p.m, Windsor Castle fell silent under the floodlights. The crowd outside expected a conventional speech. Instead, they witnessed history. Prince William appeared on screen, his voice calm, his tone measured. No emotion, no rhetoric, just precision. Britain, he said, must defend its constitutional foundations and preserve the independence and dignity of the monarchy. That word, independence, exploded across the kingdom. Within minutes, every major TV channel was tuned to breaking news. The hashtags #Stand with William and #Defend the Crown were trending worldwide. In less than 6 hours, they had reached 78 million impressions, eclipsing every political headline of the year. Inside Westminster, chaos reigned. Labour Party chat groups exploded in panic. "This is not a PR issue," wrote an aide. "It is a legitimacy crisis." 3 junior ministers skipped the next day's cabinet meeting in silent protest. Public opinion swung like a storm. A surprise YouGov poll found that 74% of Britons backed William. Just 12% supported the government's reforms. Among voters under 30, a generation many say has outgrown the monarchy, support for the prince reached a staggering 81%. The markets took notice. In 24 hours, the pound fell 1.7%, its biggest one-day fall since the Brexit vote. Analysts warned that constitutional uncertainty could shave £60 billion off the UK's projected GDP if the unrest persisted. Even the Bank of England issued an unusual statement at midnight calling for restraint from all parties concerned with the constitution. Meanwhile, opposition leader Rishi Sunak seized the moment. Standing outside Parliament, he declared, "Our monarchy is not a museum, it is the living core of British identity." Within 48 hours, the Conservative Party's poll numbers had risen 7 points. Its biggest rebound since losing the election. For Starmer, the damage was catastrophic. Allies urged him to clarify. Critics demanded an apology. But to whom? The palace? The people? Both? His government, once branded firm modernisers, now faced headlines calling it a regime at war with its own crown. And at Windsor, the heir apparent achieved in just 32 words what no politician could. He split Britain's ruling elite in two. The crowd outside the castle sang "God Save the King." But they no longer sang it for the government. What began as a boycott became a rebellion that threatened to rewrite the balance of power in England itself. The consequences were immediate, global and measurable. By dawn, trading floors from London to Singapore were in the red. The FTSE 100 index fell 3.2%, wiping out almost £89 billion of market value in a matter of hours. The pound fell to a 2-year low. Investors dubbed it the Windsor shock. Tourism executives warned of another invisible collapse. Royal ceremonies generate £1.8 billion a year, accounting for almost a tenth of foreign visitors. Now those events have been frozen. Trooping the colour, state banquets, inaugurations, all postponed indefinitely. Hotels in central London reported a 27% drop in overnight bookings, the biggest drop since the pandemic. If the royals stopped showing up, one industry insider told The Telegraph, Britain would no longer be Britain. But the economic shock was only the beginning. Diplomatically, the ripples spread faster than anyone anticipated. Within 48 hours, Canada and Australia issued a joint statement warning that political interference in royal institutions threatens the unity of the Commonwealth. New Zealand followed suit, describing the moment as a constitutional warning signal. In private, diplomats confirmed that at least 4 Commonwealth countries were quietly reconsidering their relationship with the monarchy, a sign that Britain's symbolic bond was beginning to fray. Inside Buckingham Palace, the phones rang off the hook. Princess Anne and the Duchess of Edinburgh were said to have supported William's stance, refusing to attend any government-sponsored events until constitutional integrity is restored. The Queen's office was forced to cancel 6 overseas visits scheduled for the next month. Behind the polished gates, a royal aide said, "If this continues, we will have no country left to serve." Meanwhile, Downing Street struggled to contain the storm. The Prime Minister's team drafted 12 different responses overnight. Each leaked within hours. A senior Treasury official confessed anonymously, but we tried to modernise the monarchy and now we are watching the economy collapse. Then came the international press. The New York Times called it Britain's silent civil war. Le Monde headlined, "A monarchy in revolt." Even Beijing's state-run newspaper, the Global Times, scoffed, "If Britain can't rule the royal family, how can it rule the world?" By the end of the week, the crisis had spiralled out of control for its architects. What began as a domestic policy dispute has now become a global reckoning over British identity, stability and legacy. And through it all, one truth runs deeper than any headline. If the crown is no longer above politics, politics will swallow the crown and everything built beneath it. By the end of the week, Britain was no longer arguing about the budget, but about confidence. Prime Minister Keir Starmer stood at the podium, flanked by empty chairs. The once confident government was facing its lowest approval rating in modern British history, 29% nationally down to just 17% among voters over 50. In the House of Commons, silence spoke louder than speeches. The opposition did not need to speak, the markets did. The pound, still fragile, lost 2.4% in a week. And global confidence in Britain's political stability fell to levels not seen since the Suez Crisis. Even the IMF issued a rare statement warning that constitutional uncertainty is undermining investment confidence. But beyond the economics, something deeper was breaking down: trust. Polls show that only 12% of Britons now trust Parliament to tell the truth, while 68% say the monarchy remains the last institution they trust. For a country once built on ceremony, restraint and quiet pride, that statistic reads like an obituary. Inside Windsor, aides describe William as calm but resolute. He knows he has crossed the line, one insider admits, but believes silence would be a greater betrayal. Across the country, veterans, teachers, even civil servants have written open letters calling for reconciliation, but few believe it will happen anytime soon. The kingdom still stands, but the glue that held it together, respect, faith, tradition, is gone. And as night fell on the London skyline, one headline captured the mood of a nation in turmoil. This week, Britain didn't lose its crown, it lost its certainty. When the flags came down and the crowds went home, one truth remained. Britain wasn't fighting over money or ceremony, it was fighting over meaning. The Crown and Parliament had become symbols of two versions of the same country, one that remembers who it was and one that fears what it's becoming. The crisis revealed not just political weakness, but a moral fracture, the loss of trust that once bound leaders and people together. History will remember this week not for speeches or polls, but for the silence that followed, the silence of a nation asking itself who it still believes in. Because if Britain can no longer trust its own institutions, then no constitution, no flag and no ceremony can hold it together. So what do you think? Can the United Kingdom survive without the unity that once defined it? Share this story, so not for clicks, but for conscience. So, because sometimes the truth about a nation isn't in what it celebrates, but in what it dares to question.